All right, guys, I've started the stream.
Okie dokie.
And I'll make one more call to get the people in the room here in just a minute.
Thanks. Have them bring pillows.
And now we'll be on our best Canadian behavior.
I'm sorry for stepping over your voice there, Ken. But yep, we're streaming on Twitch for sure.
Well, I'm not going to look yet because I have everything set up for this.
No, I'm out of the chat since you're doing most of the presentation today, which is actually a nice reprieve for me. I usually have to do the whole thing.
You just get to answer all the questions.
Yeah. People in chat already, which is cool. A couple of soon to be very bored people in the audience.
Shh, they can hear you.
Hey, no false advertising here. Got confirmation from Todd Knutson that Facebook stream is working good. And Fred verified it works on Facebook, so it's like all 3 streams are going.
Good.
And I'll keep the chat.
So I think you guys can see too, right? You can see the camera showing the people who are sitting here right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it is a packed house, standing room only. The suspense is killing us.
Standing room only.
Yes.
Standing room only.
It's a Jason, I think I heard. Five minutes. Looks like. And Stevie, did you want me to announce about the mics will be muted on the from the audience until the question period, or did you mention?
By all means. By all means.
I wasn't sure if you mentioned the announcement or not.
No.
Oh, and maybe you should announce too that since we're not actually there, there's no point in throwing rotten fruit or anything.
Yeah, or sadly enough money, not that it has happened, but get off the stage, you bum.
Yeah, and thanks for doing this, guys, by the way.
Yeah.
No problem.
Kind of gotten used to this from doing some sort of dumb show, so.
That's a little bit earlier, but at least we're not in Australia.
Actually, by a show of hands there, just wave, but how many people got to watch the Mark Siegel interview on last week's show? It's quite a good one. I would definitely recommend. There was a few surprises to even us diehards there. Some stuff we didn't know had happened. So some interesting, cool things in that interview. Oh, Bill's in the chat too, so. Yeah, their main co-author of the ease of use and the original NitrOS-9.
Let the people on Discord know that we're live too. That, well, I can't spoon feed them links every time we go live, but if you want to just put out a message there.
Yeah, I think Bruce already did, but let me check. Yeah, Bruce posted the seminar link already in Glenside CoCoFEST channel. Is everybody looking forward to the extra hour sleep tonight?
Well, you don't get one, Curtis.
No, we don't do that silly daylight savings crap.
That's the biggest thing I miss about Saskatchewan. Time revolving around us.
Yeah. Time in real time, that's what it is. But a few people in there. Just over 2 minutes. And yes, Fred, it's just Saskatchewan in Canada that doesn't do daylight savings. And I think in the States, it's what, Hawaii, Arizona, part of one of the state or two. Just over a minute.
Is it over yet?
No, you're not going to yak through our presentation, are you, Nick?
Good evening, Nick.
How are you?
Well, I guess you qualify as a beginner with this too, so maybe you can ask questions during the question session. But we're not going to do questions until the end because the mic echoes back too much. So,
Actually, it's in my contract that I can't be interrupted while I'm talking. So,
geez, I'm in trouble. We're gonna have fines like crazy. Okay, you guys ready to start?
Yep.
Okay, well, welcome everyone to the NitrOS-9 Ease of Use Beginners tutorial seminar. So this is something new we're trying. I've done a fair number of it in NitrOS-9, updates even back in the 90s when it was a commercial product. And it's usually been what's new this year or what we added or maybe some tips and tricks for the programmers and stuff. But we haven't really covered people that are totally new to OS9 or totally new to NitrOS-9 in general, or the ease of use project in particular, which is trying to make the whole thing a lot easier to use that people have never used it before or are brand new to the CoCo, have joined the retro computer community and decided to try out stuff on the CoCo itself. So this seminar is going to be concentrating on how to get it set up and running. We'll be mentioning how to do it in an emulator. Ken will be demonstrating it live on a real CoCo 3 with a CoCo SDC, which is kind of what its default setup is, which is the very easiest to set up. I should also mention that Ken is the host of the YouTube channel Canadian Retro Things and our current host for the Game On Challenge on our CoCoTALK show as well. So Ken will be doing most of the presentation here, doing some live feeds through OBS with his real CoCo, etc. And we'll be saving the last 15 minutes of the presentation for any questions from the audience, which is when we'll turn the mics on. There has been some feedback issues, so we don't want that interfering with the presentation itself. So we'll be doing that at the end. We also have a bunch of people in the chat that are watching here as well, including Bill Noble, who's the co-author of the original NitrOS-9 and the current ease of use project with me. We've also got Fred Provence in the front row there. He's also been contributing. He's got the new control panel. Jeff Tennyson's in the chat. He's contributed the new C compiler, the new help system, et cetera. So there's a lot of people involved with the project. Bill and I are kind of the driving forces behind it, but it's definitely not just the two of us. There's a ton of stuff that's been done over the last 30 years, including all the stuff when it went into open source with Boise and a bunch of other people that did all the drive wire stuff and everything else. So anyway, for those of you that are advanced users, this is probably going to be boring. So I hope you brought your pillows and maybe a blanket if it's cold. I'm not sure. I'm not there. And we wish we were there with you. We are definitely planning on coming out in May for the next CoCoFEST. And I will let Ken now take it away. Take it away, Ken.
Okay, well, like Curtis said, this is going to be for the complete beginner of NitrOS-9 ease of use. So we're going to go straight from downloading it off of Curtis's website all the way through using the GUI, doing some command line things, and how to customize it a little bit to make it your own. So let's start off with this. So should be seeing the NitrOS-9 Ease of Use Project website, which is lcurtisboyle.com/NitrOS-9. And the things that I'm going to be covering today, I have made videos on my YouTube channel, and there is a link right here to the playlist. And it goes a little more into depth into setting it up on the VCC or the real CoCo with SDC. I'm going to be doing it the simplest possible way here, just to show you how easy it really is. So you jump down to the download section, and beta 6.1 is the newest release right now. And you will either choose a 6809 or 6309, depending on what your computer runs. And if you have a Gimme X, there's downloads here. So you just click it, download it. And my internet is slow today.
Could be mine as well.
Too many people using the internet this early in the morning on a Saturday. Okay, and then open that up, and as you can see, there's a whole lot of stuff in here. There's a lot of documentation that is very helpful. So if you need, it's worth going through and reading a lot of that. But for setting it up on the real CoCo with an SDC, you just need the SDC virtual hard drive. So you just drop that onto a SD card and put it into your computer. And I've already got mine loaded up onto my computer here. So just show you, just got the virtual hard drive on here. So mount that to drive 0.
It looks like your stream is froze there.
My stream is froze.
Yeah, your video is coming through. Like I can see you fine on the Zoom call, but the CoCo screen is just froze up.
Okay, well, let's just reboot my OBS then, because it's been doing that to me lately.
This is our Bill Gates blue screen of death moment here, live.
Okay, start sharing that screen again.
While I was setting up, I also mentioned that if you're running it on an emulator such as MAME or VCC or even the new version of Xroar, there's a second disk image that's included, a floppy disk image. And that is to boot off the floppy. That way we were able to keep a hard drive image that's common to whether you're running on real hardware or an emulator. So we can update it exactly the same. You only need the one. The floppy just boots up with virtual drivers to be able to handle the emulators.
Yeah, so you need the floppy. In my video, I do show how to set that all up on VCC, and the floppy disk is required for that. So,
and your stream is working now. So
okay. And yes, I know my typing is absolutely abysmal. So
I would point out one thing too. If you saw him typing the drive command, there's something I discovered by accident. I don't know if it's documented, but you actually don't need the extension if you only have one image called 68 SDC. In this case, you can skip the .vhd and it still works.
Yeah, you can. I just do it all the time. And anyways, you type DOS to start it up. I am in the habit of putting the extension in, so I haven't been able to get myself out of that.
I'll mention here the time he's typing in. That's not absolutely necessary. A lot of if you're just going in to play a game or something, you can probably just utterly skip it. If you're actually doing programming, it's kind of nice to have timestamps, like real ones on your files, so you can tell if you've got backup versions. If I backed it up recently, because it'll have the same time.
And there's also other reasons to put the time in, which I will be getting into a little bit later. So once you do that, it's booting up, as you can see. Takes a minute. Takes another minute. And there we go. So we are into the terminal window here. And one thing about it, when the computer first boots up like this, it boots up 3 separate terminal windows. And you can just hit the clear button to scroll through them. And if you hit shift clear, you go backwards through them. So the first thing I will take a look at is the G shell, because it's the reason that I fired up NitrOS-9 in the first place. Oh, wow, that's bright red.
Yeah, that's the composite versus RGB setting thing.
Let's just, okay, that's not as nice looking. It's a little bit blurrier, but I just changed over to composite, so it's gray, easier to look at. Now the computer will default to your right joystick port for the mouse. And I'm using the Black Beauty here analog joystick. And so you can use it as your mouse and just double click on things with the fire button. And you can scroll through just like other GUIs, use little arrows at the side, but there's also a keyboard shortcut for that, which is using the shift key and the up and down arrows. You can scroll through the files a lot easier than trying to center yourself on the little arrow there.
And for those that you know about the keyboard mouse option, which Ken will get into a little bit, this is separate from that. This is why you're just running your normal mouse or your normal joystick. You can use the shift arrow keys to go up and down pages. And
there's a reason that it's a good idea to have the Black Beauty joystick, which I'll get into in a second. But first, let's take a look at one of the nice things with the GUI here. So you can open up games, just as simple as that. Now, if you go back, you can open up a second game. And now you will see that you've got both these games are open. So you can have multiple games open at the same time and go back and forth between them. So if you want to close these games, a game like Tetris, it tells you right on it to hit break to close the game. So that's now closed that window. Now in Thexter, if you hit break, it just takes you back to the title screen. So what you have to do is hit Control Q. Control Q quits the game. So if you're in a game that doesn't have an easy way to close the screen, it's always Control Q.
Well, not always. Everybody has their own standard.
Okay, well.
Yeah, sometimes it's Control C, sometimes it's Control E, Control Q, Alt Q I've seen. I wish they'd kind of standardize that. One thing we'll be planning on adding on a future version, I'll just give you a hint here, is we're going to be adding a separate little, if you guys have seen some of the Amiga utilities, it's a separate little pop-up window when you launch a game, and it'll give you a very brief description of some critical keys, including how to quit. So I'll be introducing that. So when you fire up a game, if you turn that option on, you'll be able to see a little thing saying, Thexter hit Control Q to quit.
Oh, so I've just been absolutely lucky enough that every game that I've tried so far, it's always been Control Q.
Yep.
What are the odds? Okay, so now the keyboard mouse that Curtis was talking about.
Well, this is if you don't have a joystick or a mouse at all, like you just got a stock CoCo 3 with 512K or more. So you can still use the GUI with it.
You can still use the GUI. You can, if you want to get into the keyboard mouse, it is
Control Clear.
Control Clear, yes. I was just looking at my notes. So Control Clear, and now the joystick joystick that I have here is no longer controlling the mouse. It's now the arrow keys. So obviously up, down, left, and right, move the mouse around the screen. But this completely takes over the arrow keys, and the F1 and F2 are your mouse button keys. So using something like the shift up and down to go through the screens like I did before won't work anymore because the arrow keys have taken over. So the functions of the arrow keys and the F1 and F2 have been overridden. And it is screen specific. So if you go into another instance, the joystick, the keyboard joystick the keyboard mouse will no longer won't be active in other shells.
Yeah, other screens and windows. It's local to whatever process you're in right now, whatever program you're running. So if you turn it on here in G Shell, it does not affect your shell windows. I will mention that the keyboard mouse also uses the shift arrows and the control arrows as well. So shift does very fine tuning.
Just about to say that. Hey, I told you no interrupting, Curtis. So yes, shift will fine tune it. So you're moving like 8 pixels normally, and then shift just moves you 1 pixel in any direction. And if you hit control, it jumps you to the bottom or the top of the screen, left or the right of the screen. So it's a quick way to just jump across the screen. And to turn it off, you hit control clear, and you are back to using the mouse again. And now I will show you up here in the Tandy menu, not the X menu, the Tandy menu. You have some little apps here like your calculator. So if you click on that, now you're on the screen. You can, one click of the button anchors where the app is going to be, and then you can resize it to whatever you want. And click it again, and it puts it onto the screen. But you can also add another one. So anchor it, resize it to what you want, and there you go. You've got the clock. And now you can actually set an alarm on the clock. So if you want to be just working on something for an hour or something, it's one of the reasons to put the time in at the beginning. You can set yourself an alarm for a certain time, and the computer will tell you to take a break or go do something else. And that is, a quick little look at the GUI.
I will mention one other quick thing. When you're bringing it up to anchor the window, when you're moving it around,
oh yes,
it will default to the smallest size that window's allowed to run at, because certain apps need a certain amount of screen real estate to minimally function, and they won't let you size it smaller. But that gives you the size that it can no lower than that. It can't go any shorter vertically. It can't go any shorter horizontally. So that's your minimum size.
You've got the minimum size, but also the other thing is do not overload the screen, because once you have a few things on your screen here, if you try to put more things than it can handle, it will lock up the screen and you'll just be stuck in it and you won't be able to anchor anything to it. Or
yeah, that's something we have to fix.
Yeah. So it's a little problem with it right now, but just don't do it.
I'll give one sneaky advanced technique. If you do need more than one screen with G Shell apps running, if you change the resolution with the view menu here, it'll actually create any of the resizable apps on that same window type. Like right now, I think you're running in 40 by 25 4 color. So if you created an 80 by 25, or you created a 40 by 24 or 40 by 25 16 color, and you start launching those apps, it'll create a new screen based on that resolution. So you can get up to 3 screens of G Shell apps running at once in different resolutions.
Oh, there we go. And there's the calendar. A little hard to see in
80 column on the screen.
There. Much easier to see in RGB than an 80 column. So that is the GUI. Now back into the command line, I'll show you a few of the commands you can use. So like right now, I am actually running it in composite monitor because that's what it defaults to. So if you type, so you can type mon type and then use R for RGB, C for composite, or M for monochrome. So you can change it, and there, now it's in an RGB monitor. And you can't hear it right now because I don't think I'm sharing the sound, but there's a key click that goes on. It's an electronic clicking every time you hit a key. If you want that off, you can just type key click off, and it turns off your key click.
By default, when you install NitrOS-9 EOU, it should only have key click turned on the main/term window, which is where Ken currently is running the G Shell app. It should not be turned on in W1 and W2, I believe.
Actually, I think I'm in W2 right now, so it wouldn't have been on anyway, but.
And he'll later get to how you can shut that on or off on everything if you want.
Yeah. And then simple way, if you want to change the width of the screen, you can just type width 40 or width 80 to go back. And now one of the nicest things that I've found in the command line here is the help menu.
Shout out to Jeff Tennyson for doing this one here, because this is a much more advanced version of help than the original one we had before.
So these are all things that there's help for. So, oh, I guess my little keyboard's in the way, but it says topic down there. And if you want to know just anything about something, you just, oops, I spelled that wrong. So it gives you the syntax, so it's key click, you either type key click on or off, and it'll tell you all the information about it. Yeah, so it's extremely helpful to go through this and look at everything. So if you wanted to know what the different monitor types you can use are, and it'll explain it right there to you. So R for RGB, C for composite, M for monochrome. And to get out of that, just hit enter. And you're back into the command line. CLS will clear your screen. Now, you can do some command line editing here. If you use the down arrow, it takes you back through everything that you've been typing in, and then just loops it. And the up arrow will take you through in the opposite direction. Left and right arrows just move you around in the line you're on. And if you use shift, it takes you to the beginning or the ending of the line. And if you need to add something, so let's say, okay, we'll just, for instance, oh, I spelled it wrong, so it doesn't know what it's doing. Well, I can just go into it and hit control. It adds a space, and I can just put the C in. Now, the thing when you're doing the command line editing here is that if you hit enter, it only accepts up to where your cursor is. So putting the space in was a control right arrow. If you hit control left arrow, it takes away whatever, it erases whatever your cursor is on. But if I hit enter here, because I'm not right at the end of the line, it only will accept up to where I had the cursor. So I don't know, Curtis, is there anything about command line editing there that you wanted to add?
No, that's pretty. I mean, there's a few tricks you can do, but that's not something for beginners. I get used to it too. But yeah, basically, if you're repeating a line and you were editing it and you do some changes, you would normally hit shift right to go to the far right of it. Yeah. To enter the command and then hit enter. But I know DOS defaults it no matter where you hit enter, it will accept the entire line as what you're actually trying to run. And I've gotten used to it both ways. It just depends on the circumstance. Sometimes I prefer the OS9 ways. Sometimes I prefer the DOS ways. So, but I'm quite used to it. So just adding the one extra shift right arrow to do the line is fine. It's also nice to cut stuff off if I've been doing a multi command where I'm doing semicolons to separate multiple commands, and all of a sudden I want to run just say the first two on the last time, and then I just go to that part, hit enter, and it immediately just runs those two. So
yeah, so that's command line editing.
I will ask for people who are on the stream here and in chat, if you guys can mention, is it okay seeing the 80 column here, or should Ken switch to 40 column for text type stuff? We'll leave it in 80 for now, but if somebody says it's too hard to read, we'll switch it up.
Well, I can change it to 40. Oh, that's a simple command. There we go. Okay, well, now I am going to show you how to customize things for how you want to do it. Now, if you look at your directory, there is a file up there near the top called boots. So if you change your directory to the boots directory, and actually before I do that, I want to show you swap boot. So this is how you change how your computer is booting up.
Yeah, and this is something that was newly added, I think, in Ease of Use 6, maybe 5. I can't remember now, but it's trying to make things a little bit easier.
So as you can see, you have 5 choices. There's 2 to boot with an SDC and a drive wire. There's 2 to boot with emulators and 1 for just the SDC. Now the emulators, the hardware clock one, if you're running an emulator on your laptop or whatever, and you set it for the hardware boot number 3 there, what it does is it will actually read the time and the date in from your computer every time it boots up. So you will switch, you'll skip that step on boot up. If you
want to type it in by hand.
Yeah, and if you do the emulator soft clock, you can still type in whatever date you want. So just in case you want to put a different date on for something, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm using 5, so then it just goes through the startup. And I believe this is what it would have defaulted to anyway.
Yes.
But
and for those who have got a little bit of experience in OS9 but are new to the swap boot thing, if you have any questions about that, ask us in the question thing. I can go into a bit more detail how this works if you need to.
yeah.
A few comments too. They said the 40 column is a lot more clear on the stream. So
Okay, good.
80 wasn't bad, but.
So after you're done to swap boot, just type DOS to restart the computer, to restart your instance of the NitrOS-9 here. Now I am going to show you how to personalize everything. And what I have found, there's a text editor called VED, and that's the easiest one to use. That it's a text editor that has a thick manual that does a lot, but just knowing a couple of things of keys of it, it's very useful.
There are many others included. So if you guys are more familiar with Scred or SLED or Edit or VI or whatever, there's a ton of them. Emacs, there's a ton of them on there, so you can pick whichever one you're most familiar with. VED, I personally find probably the easiest while being really powerful, and it also has built-in help, which is really nice.
Yeah. So here's where we go into that boots one. So change the directory to boots. And so now you'll see that there are 5 different copies of 3 different files there. There's startup, OS9 boot, and environment.file. And each of those 5 things are the things that you had a choice of in your swap boot. Now, if you're going to be customizing this, I highly recommend make your own copies of each of those 3 directories so that you can play around with those, and then you still have the originals to go back to if you screw it up so badly that you don't like it anymore and you're doing something that's just not working for you. So 2 things about making a new directory here. The number of characters allowed is 29. That's the maximum number.
Yeah, it's an OS9 limitation.
Yeah. And when you're doing it for an emulator, it has to start with EMU. So your startup.emu and then whatever you're calling it. An OS9 boot.emu, whatever you're calling it. That's the way that OS9 recognizes that it's an emulator that you're running and not real hardware. So it has to start with EMU.
Yeah, and I will mention as a technical detail, the reason for that is that those boots have to go onto the floppy image, not onto the hard drive image. And that's its way of telling the difference.
So what I'm doing here is I'm using the copy command, which is a really easy way of just copying these files. So you do copy, then your file that you're going to copy, and then your new file that you're going to make. And all of three of these files have to have the same name after the extension name. So it'll be, I'm making startup.ken, then NitrOS-9 boot.
This is where command history comes in, or command line editing comes in handy.
I guess I could be using that.
Feel free to experiment, folks.
Yeah, feel free to experiment. Now, copy is not the most efficient way of doing this, but
yeah, there are more powerful copy utilities, but this is the easiest to remember because it's basically just source file name, destination file name. It does the rename on the fly if you make them different, which is doing here. But there's multiple other ones included with NitrOS-9 EU as well.
And if you're a beginner, then trying to remember when you think, gee, I want to copy something, what would be a good command for that? I know, copy. Okay, now if you look at the directory, we have the three files named Ken. Startup Ken's way up at the top there, and then at the bottom, OS9 boot Ken and environment.file Ken. So with VED, you can edit the startup file or the environment file. Now, I'll just show you quickly how to do an edit in the environment file. So as you can see, everything here is very well commented. So it is worth going through and seeing what everything you can customize here is. So I'm just going to do a couple of customizations here. So you can see you can edit the palette colors and key repeat delays and speed and everything else. Now, what I want to edit here is key click. I'm going to turn that off. So you highlight what you want to get rid of, like I'm changing the 1 to a 0. So highlight the 1 and hit break, and that erases whatever your cursor is on, and just type in the new number. Because the problem is if you were on this and you just tried to say change it to 1 now, it just adds the number rather than typing over it. So you have to use the break key to erase it.
Yeah. Now, if you want to learn, study the VED manual, there's stuff like changing between overstrike and insert mode and a bunch of other things. So it's a very powerful editor, but just for the quick beginner, the easiest way to remember is just hit break to delete under the cursor, shift break to delete backwards.
Yeah. And on my videos that I did on my channel, I do have a direct link to the VED manual. So it's really easy to just go in there and get that. And start reading it over and watch your head explode from all the information in it. Now, I am going to change my monitor type too, because I am just about always on my CoCo 3 here using the switcheroo for RGB. So there is no point in me starting it up in composite usually. And if I do want to start it up in composite, which is a lot less often, I can, just type in the command for changing it rather than, I just like to have it boot up in RGB.
Yeah, the reason we have a default into composite is some people that had just bought a CoCo on eBay, hook it up to a TV, RGB and 80 columns is pretty well completely unreadable. So this was a way of a common denominator, lowest common denominator, that everybody would be able to see it. And then they can, of course, just go in and change it like Ken's doing right now. If they do have RGB and they never have to look at the hideous 40 column again.
And then once you've made all the changes that you want to, there's a lot more changes you can make, as I said. I mean, the file goes on a bit longer here. There's all kinds of things you can change. So definitely read through this. It's worth it just to play around with it and make your OS9 or NitrOS-9 file your own. And when you're done, hit Control or Alt Q, sorry. And you want to save this file. Now you could rename it here, but I have to keep it the same as the other instances that I made of this file. So overwrite it, and we're back into the terminal window. Now, if I ran swap boot right now, it goes through all the checking and checking. There is now a number 6 at the bottom there, boot for SDC Ken. And that's those 3 files that I made. And the one that I have now made some customization to. So if I change my boot to that.
Oh, Ken, I got a notification here from Stevie. He said, is there a way to show the web page without showing all of OBS? It's a fairly small view portal. So they're seeing like all your audio controls and everything else on the stream.
Oh, I don't know.
I know you're kind of new to OBS. So.
Yes, actually there is. Too bad I've just about done the presentation. Is that better?
He actually put that in the beginning. I didn't notice it till now, so that's my fault. In typical Canadian fashion, I'm sorry.
And I am sorry too. So booting it back up, you can see it is
But
now
I get slightly
in
better colors.
better colors, clearer RGB, and you can't hear it, but the key click is now off too.
Yeah. There's a few other things in there too, like if you have RGB, you can default it to 80 column. That's one I would normally do myself on RGB. But basically you can customize a whole bunch of stuff. There's tons of stuff. There's even stuff for printers and RS-232 packs if you have those too. Not all software uses those, though quite a bit does. But yeah, as Ken said, just go and fiddle around. There's comments. Anything starting with an asterisk is a comment, which is basically just a REM statement to help you remember what everything does. Also, Fred in the front row there mentioned that you can also change the monitor type through the GUI as well with the control panel, which I'm sure he's plugging because he helped write the new version. Actually, I can't help. He did write the new version.
Okay. Now, the other thing that you can do that I do touch on in my video is you can edit your OS9 boot file with QuickGen, but I'm not going to get into that here because when you edit your OS9 boot file, you're actually editing the OS9 boot file that is running. So if you screw it up, you can mess up your files. So
yeah, you can get to the point where you can't boot if you start putting in like the wrong hardware. If you type MDIR right now, Ken, just to show people, just so they kind of have a little bit of what it is.
Type which?
MDIR, module directory. So this is a list of all the files and modules loaded into RAM right now. The bottom chunk is basically actual commands that are preloaded just to make them run faster. But the top part is all the individual files that make up the OS9 NitrOS-9 operating system itself, like window drivers and keyboard drivers and mouse drivers and stuff to talk to your hard drive and your floppy drives and Windows and all that kind of stuff. And that's what you're editing in the OS9 boot file. You're swapping those in and out, which means you can add in new hardware. If you have a SCSI hard drive, you can add that in. If you have an ID hard drive, you can add that in. If you have a GIME-X, I mean, we've pre-made one, so you don't have to, but you can do all that kind of stuff too. But if you put the wrong ones in, you could be in a world of trouble. For example, if you put in a serial mouse driver and that takes over the mouse and you don't actually have a serial mouse, well, now you don't have a functioning mouse anymore. And you can really screw things up, like certain hard drive drivers may not talk to you the SDC at all. And if you put those in, it can't find the hardware to even load up and boot, in which case you can't. So that's why you should probably have a little bit of experience to customize the OS9 boot itself. There are a few safer things, like if you want to change the window defaults, like you want all your windows to be 40 column instead of 80 column or different colors. You can do that kind of stuff, and that's fairly safe. But it is, this word of warning, caution to the beginners there.
Yeah, you can mess around as much as you want with the other files, but this one, know what you're doing before you mess around with it.
Yeah. And there's enough customization you can do with the environment file and also the startup file, which is basically just a batch script. It's like what's it called? Autoexec.bat on DOS. If you're familiar with that, it's basically when you first fire it up and the whole operating system is ready loaded, just starts running a bunch of commands that you tell it to do, which you can do. Like in the default, it's loading in a ton of fonts and graphic pointers and paint patterns and all kinds of stuff. If you never use that kind of stuff, you can take that out of the startup file and boot much faster.
I'll just show you what the startup file looks like. So these are the things that you can go into and change in your startup file.
Yeah. Like, for example, starting windows that didn't create shell in 2 windows. If you want to create more windows than that, go right ahead. If you don't want to merge in all the fonts, you can take that out or just load in specific fonts that you want. View patterns, all kinds of stuff in there. So that you can totally customize too. And you can run literally almost any OS9 command in the system in the startup file.
So you just have to add it here.
Yeah, or take stuff out.
Or take stuff out. So you can add or take things out of here, and it changes how it boots up. So. And that is, in essence, the very beginning of OS9 getting started.
Yep. We will mention on my website, I've got a direct link to the playlist that Ken has been doing for his NitrOS-9 for Beginners tutorial series, of which you got, 4 parts now, I believe?
Yeah. And did I not even mention that at the beginning?
You mentioned it existed, but...
Oh. Let me just...
I'll also mention we got a question or a comment, I should say, from Mark Bosley. How about modifying D0, D1 for floppy types? We'll get into the question and answer session because I know Mark's actually at the show. So once we turn the mics on, but Mark, keep that question in mind. I'm thinking you're talking about like an 80 track versus a 40 track or something. I'm not quite sure if that's what you mean, but we'll get into that once we get to the live questions.
So if you're on the Ease of Use Project website and you just come down, then this link right here takes you to...
You're not sharing that particular one yet?
Am I not sharing?
You're sharing the OBS link. Well, let me just check on Twitch in case it's different. Yeah, you're sharing the NitrOS-9 screen stuff, your OBS screen.
Oh, it froze up on me then. Wouldn't be something dealing with the CoCo computer if there wasn't problems.
I blame Windows. CoCo's running fine.
There
we see it.
Okay, so if you're on the Ease of Use Project website, then right here, this link takes you straight to the playlist for the 4 videos. So I've got one setting it up on real hardware and on the VCC emulator. And I've got one going through the GUI and another one with a few more GUI things and some command line editing, and then a video on using VED and QuickGen for editing the boot files.
Yeah, and shout out to Bob Vanderpool, the original author of VD, which was a commercial project back in the 90s, and he gave us permission to put that onto Ease of Use with no restrictions at all. And an excellent manual he's done for it too. It's an actual very powerful editor. It's really good for editing programs. Actually, it's got some special things specifically for programming, including stuff like auto line numbering for BASIC.
And I think that's all I have to say, so.
Yeah, I mean, the Ease of Use Project website has got screenshots if you want to take a look, if you're even interested in it, if you've never seen it before. It's got downloads, including older versions, special versions for the Gimme X, special versions for the Matchbox, and CoCoFPGA stuff that actually has some enhanced modes, like 80 by 50 text modes. There's documentation. That's an ongoing project. We've currently got the windowing part of the original OS9 Level 2 manual and the technical reference. So those are more towards programmers at this point, but it shows some of the changes to system calls. Brand new ones have been added. Some whole new driver systems have been added, like VRN. So there's a lot of technical stuff there if you really want to get into the weeds. And I think we're ready to open up the show floor to questions. And I know Mark had one question on the floppy drive, so I'll let him speak that out loud so we can answer it. Hopefully everybody can hear the questions on the stream properly, and hopefully we don't have too much feedback because we were having a little bit of that earlier, but we'll plow through it.
Is anybody awake out there?
Yeah, we just got to get the mic turned on.
Oh, there we go.
So on device descriptors D0, D1 for the floppy disk, a way to modify them permanently, and you can do it in the startup script, but say to modify the device descriptor itself and save it off into the boot file.
Okay. Probably, I'm trying to think what the easiest way. There's a couple ways to do it. The QuickGen program that actually lets you edit the OS9 boot files and switch modules in and out actually has a patch function in it. So if you know the offsets, like the old mod patch command, you can actually change them right live in there, and then they're permanently saved in the boot file once you save it. So that's one way. Second way is if you have the device descriptors, which I believe you follow the modules tree from the modules directory, you can actually find various versions of it, like a 40-track single-sided, 40-track double-sided, 35-track, 80-track double-sided, etc. You can actually use QuickGen, delete the existing one. Say you want to replace D0 with an 80-track drive. You get D for delete D0, and then you can insert it at the place that it originally was at, or anywhere else. It really doesn't matter, but it's nice to keep it organized. And then you can just load in the one that you actually do want with the settings that you want, and then save it out from there, and that'll fix it as well. Oh. Question?
Yeah, I might be totally wrong about this. Maybe I have to go on those. Wow, it's a lot of feedback.
Yeah, we're getting bad feedback. So I might step away from the speakers.
I'll go out of the room. But there's like two path directories in OS9. Is that right? It's like a command directory or command path.
Yeah, the execution directory and the data directory. Yes.
And how do those interact? And are there any commands that act differently between those two?
Okay, the data directory, which is the one that we were showing with CD, because you can use CD or CHD to change the data directory, and then you got CX and CHX will change the execution directory. Now, what the execution directory does is that if it's trying to run a program, the execution directory is where it looks for commands. That's normally /DD commands, and most people will never have to change that. If you need to change it for a specific project, say you want to test your, say, writing software that's going to replace commands already in the existing commands directory, you may want to temporarily, in the shell window that you're in, change the execution directory to your own temporary copy, and then it'll try to run it from there instead of the main one. So you can actually have both versions existing simultaneously type thing. The other thing is that Shell Plus, the shell that we're running, the command line shell, actually has a path command. If you're familiar with DOS and some other operating systems, you can actually set up multiple directories of the search through. But those do not work at the operating system level. That works in the shell level. So if you're actually trying to run executable commands from within a program, for example, not going through a shell, your program won't know any of that stuff exists. So the execution directory is the default for the core OS itself. The data directory is basically just the default directory where it's looking for data files or text files that you're editing or whatever, and that you just do the CD command to move. And basically, if you do a dir, you're doing it from the data directory. If you do a dir-x, it'll show you what your contents of your current execution directory are. Hopefully that explains it well enough. Any further clarification needed, let me know.
Anybody else?
Any questions from absolute beginners who've never used OS9 or NitrOS-9 before? Because I don't even know what mix in the audience we have. Like, I'm sure there's some people that are at least somewhat familiar with it from the past, but wondering if there's anybody who's completely new to it, has never ran it before. Nope, doesn't look like it. Oh, quick question. If you guys can just lift your hands, we don't have to do mic feedback. How many here have actually tried NitrOS-9 ease of use so far in the audience? Sort of.
I got into it for the games.
Yeah, I mean, one of the purposes of EOU was to make it easy as a runnable operating system instead of having all these intricacies of customizing your boots and stuff. And Ken and the Amigos boat and Aaron, they both, like I showed them NitrOS-9 a couple years ago, and they were kind of going, I don't want to learn all this. And once we started getting it so that it defaults to an ease of use where you just type DOS, then you type G shell, and then you're running a GUI, and they like it much better now.
Hey, Curtis.
Go ahead, Steve.
From the live chat about NitrOS-9 networking.
You can do some networking with drive wires. If you enable the drive wire boot, I can't remember if we have all the networking stuff built in as a default. If you turn on absolutely everything with driver, because it has like MIDI and virtual windowing and a bunch of other stuff too, it starts taking more and more memory, which can be an issue depending on the amount of programs you want to run at once. But I do believe the DriveWire boot does have some of that built in. I also saw Robert Seek has a question, minimum required to run OS-9. OS-9 itself will run in 128K, and if you edit the startup file and take out a lot of the extra loading and stuff we do, you can boot it in 128K. But even with the original Tandy version, which was smaller, 128K is kind of limiting. G-Shell itself actually had hard-coded limits in it. If it has 120K, it shuts off some features just because there's not enough memory to do it. So it's definitely a 512K recommended. In the case of ease of use, the way we have it set up, it's 512K required, because instead of having to do all of these shortcuts and skipping features and all that kind of stuff and giving a generally bad experience. If anybody who remembers trying to run a Mac in 128K, it's kind of like that, where you had to swap floppies all the time. Well, in this case, you'd be swapping programs in and out, and you can only have like 1 or 2 windows open at the most, and then you're out of memory, or you have 1 or 2 windows open and that's too much and you can't run programs. And it becomes a very unsavory user experience. So it requires 512K for ease of use. It definitely will use more. If you have 1 or 2 meg, it uses that just fine. I run mine with 2 meg. And then you basically don't have too many restrictions at all. You can run all kinds of stuff. So that should answer that. Eric Montero asks, I will be looking into at some point, specifically BaseCo9. I do plan on doing some tutorials on BaseCo9, actually on the CoCoTALK show in the future, or maybe as an after dark or something special on the CoCoTALK channel, but to try to go through it, because that's a very powerful language that I think is definitely underutilized. That swap boot utility you guys saw, I actually wrote that in BaseCo9 just as an example. That's a basic program. Eric says, and possibly save the final product so it runs directly from an icon on the GUI. Yes, I do plan on getting into that too, because basically there's just a couple little files you need to make a GUI runnable program. You have to make an icon, and there's an icon editor in there called SuperIke, which will do that for you. It's a nice little graphic editor. You use a mouse to draw it. And then there's a thing called an application interface file, AIF file. And that's just a little text file that has parameters like what type of a screen does it run on, what's the name of the program, what's the name of the program as you want to display it on the screen itself. That's new to NitrOS-9, that wasn't in the original. And a few other parameters for it, basically default colors and palettes and stuff like that. So basically you just edit a text file, you make your icon, you put them in the right spots, and then it shows up in the GUI. David Chern just saying that's a good question to ask. Robert Sieg, does OS-9 run with the CoCo 2 and the CoCo 3? NitrOS-9 EOU is strictly CoCo 3 because we're using the windowing system and everything else, the G shell and stuff. That's CoCo 3 exclusive. NitrOS-9 does work as level 1 on the CoCo 1, 2, and the Dragon. It's a bit more limited. There is CoCo VGA supports. You can run a 64 by 32 screen if you have a CoCo VGA, or you can run the standard 32 by 16 screen. Some of the games we've actually got pre-installed, like Biosphere and stuff, are actually our level 1 games, so those are obviously running as well. Of course, you're limited to 64K. There's some special, if you have a hacked out CoCo 1 or 2 with a 128K upgrade or something like that, you can actually get RAM disk drivers and stuff that run off that. So you can run NitrOS-9 itself, and it is optimized compared to the original standard Tandy ones on CoCo 1 or 2, but a lot of the functionality that Ken was showing you today, like windowing and the GUI and stuff, that doesn't exist under that. So it's a lot more limiting, but if you have one, if you want to fiddle with it, you can still multitask. You can still multi-user for that matter. You can set up a terminal and log in from another computer into your CoCo while you're still on your CoCo. So, Jeff Tennyson, yes, using multiple processes that coordinate, you can make huge programs in BaseCo9. That is absolutely true. I've done it myself. A program I'm trying to get patched up to run under NitrOS-9 because some of the calls and the RAM disk driver stuff has changed. And actually, they used a custom one that didn't work with anything else back in the day. But Window Writer is a GUI-style, mouse-driven word processor. It's not just a text editor. It's a full word processor. And it's definitely was optimized for printers and stuff for doing like bolds and italics and underline, all kinds of fancy stuff, changing fonts. And that entire thing is written in Basic 9. If you took all the code together, because it's got different chunks to it for handling the printers and handling the screens and handling the RAM drive and certain editing functions and global search and replace and a bunch of other things, it's probably about 250K of Basic 9 code running as one program. And it just, swaps modules. And we can get the technical details of that in the future thing when I get into the Basic 9 stuff. But yeah, you can definitely make Basic 9 or even regular OS9 machine language or C programs that are bigger than 64K if you use the module system to your advantage. Terry Steen says, there are 609 and 609 builds. How hard is it to set up the two builds or switch to boot as 609 after CPU upgrade? Well, considering they're basically identical, except the 609 version has an optimized boot file so that all the modules run fully native with all the 609 bells and whistles run a lot faster. But the 609 version of the hard drive also has some of the programs themselves optimized for 609. I've demonstrated on CoCoTALK before, Rescue on Fractless, which literally runs 40% faster than the 609 version. And there's other programs on there that have 609 enhancements too. So you can still run 609 code on the 609 version. They run fine. They still run 10 to 15% faster because of native mode. So you get a speed gain even then, even if you don't switch anything else. But you definitely would want to download the 609 version because the whole operating system runs a lot faster. You'll definitely notice the difference. And the GimmyX version is even faster than that, of course. And there's 609 and 609 versions of the GimmyX. So
one thing that I would add there too is that if you have programs saved on your 6809 hard drive, there is a blank hard drive you can download. Just put that on your computer, switch your programs over to your blank hard drive, and then change to the 6309 because then you can take in over any of your own customized programs you want.
Yeah, the system supports 2 hard drives. So that's supported in MAME of the emulator. It's supported on the CoCo SDC. You just mount it as drive 1, your second blank hard drive, which is another 128 meg you get. And the latest version of VCC supports 2 hard drives. So if you've got an older version of VCC, you will have to upgrade it. But we created that so that we can keep the operating system hard drive. So we can just give you a flat out replacement. So it replaces the operating system itself, a whole bunch of apps every time we do a release, and also adds in anything new we've added. But you can keep all of your own stuff that you want to keep yourself on the second hard drive. And then if you do upgrade to a 609 or you upgrade to a GimmyX, all you have to do is just mount that drive and then everything's there and you can just run it as normal.
Or upgrade to the latest version of NitrOS-9 EOU.
Yeah. We are planning on eventually getting it as the updates slow down a little bit to make a little script. We'll make a small hard drive image or something like that. You'll just run a script and you can update your existing one if you want to do that. We'll still keep releasing the full ones because some people join in late. So there'll be an option to do both. But yeah, currently every release we've done up to this point has been, here's a brand new image. Everything we had on there before is still there, but there's a ton of stuff added and a ton of improvements. CoCoTALK, I'm assuming that's Stevie.
Daddy Burrito is asking what compilers are available.
Okay, well, Basic 9 has a compile option. That's called packing, and that speeds it up and crunches the code down. There's a C compiler that Jeff Tennyson's been working on, so it's actually been expanded from the original microware C compilers or even some of the patch versions of the C compiler from back then. So that's an ongoing thing. There's several assemblers. There's versions of Forth. There's versions of Lisp. There's versions of Logo, I think. Now, not all of those are on EOU yet because I haven't had a chance to test and vet them to make sure that they're not, having little problems and stuff. But there's a ton of different languages available. Fred, I've worked on Window Writer 2. It's a nice program, a little clunky to set up and run under NitrOS-9, but I've gotten it to work. Yeah, I'm going through and fixing it. I'm actually decompiling it because there's a few changes I want to make to the program too that I'd started back in the day, but I lost those when my hard drive crashed. Make backups, folks. But yeah, I'm planning on doing some improvements to it as well. Plus, I was basing it on my copy that I bought years and years ago, 1.2, and I think there's a 1.3 out now too. So I want to make sure I'm optimizing and changing a more up-to-date version. Any further questions from the room here too while I'm checking the chat? If you have one, just run up and grab the mic. Fred mentioned you have Pascal as well. Yeah, thanks. I forgot about that one. There's also emulators on there. So if you want to run an emulator on a CoCo, you can run RSB, which is Radio Shack Basic. That's a Chris Burke product that actually lets you run Disk Basic under OS9, NitrOS-9. And some things are actually faster because we've optimized some of the graphic system it calls. Some of it's a bit slower. It doesn't, handle machine language programs or anything like that, but for straight basic programs, you can actually run most of those. There's also the CPM compiler. That one runs a bit slow because it's emulating an 8080 CPU, but we've actually got some old games like Zork, and there's the Turbo Basic or Turbo Pascal. I can't remember what we've got on there now. Turbo Pascal, I think, that you can run as that as well under CPM on a CoCo. So we're actually taking a 2 megahertz CPU and emulating a 4.77 megahertz 8080. So,
But most importantly, Zork.
1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, and Hitchhikers, I think, is on there too, and
Yeah.
a few others, but yeah. We're just about the end of our time, so if anybody has any last questions, please get them out before the presentation ends. We'll go on to the next speaker. Oh, a whole bunch just showed up here. Okay. Terry Steen, just wondering what you use for your drive, laptop, SD, SSD drive, MFM, etc. Not that important, just wondering. We default to SDC or the emulated drive for emulators, which is kind of a generic thing. But yeah, if you add in the different drivers for like the Glenside IDE or the Canton SCSI or whatever else, you can definitely throw those in. They work. Grant Lee, when is this presentation over? Everyone is falling asleep. When's Nick's speech? Who cares about Nick? He says he's awesome. Obviously, Nick's check got through and he's been bribed. Robert Sieg, do people use MM1 as a useful device with OS9 as versus CoCo 3? There's not that many MM1s out there. It definitely is a nice machine. It's a 68070. Was one of the quote-unquote unofficial CoCo 4s, along with the TC70, TC9, and the System 4 or 5 from Delmar. And it's an OSK machine. So it has a really nice GUI that Kevin Darling, who actually did some of the mods for the existing one, kind of took to the next level. So it runs really nice and has DMA and a bunch of other stuff, much higher graphics modes of DMA, sound chip, all kinds of stuff. So it's a really nice machine. But it's a bit more rare because obviously it wasn't produced in the quantities that Radio Shack did things. And since we're just about out of time here, any last questions from the audience live at the show?
1 minute.
Looks okay there. And any last ones from the chat? I know there's a bit of a delay. Steve mentioned the MC10 CoCo VGA. I think that's Brendan Donahe. His presentation is up next. Bill Noble says, on my real CoCo 3, I use SDC, DriveWire, and the Glenside IDE all together in one boot. So if you want a ton of hard drive space, set it up like Bill. And I think that's it then.
That's our time.
So thanks everybody for coming out. Hope everybody's having a great time at the show. We'll definitely be out there in May. Cross my fingers anyway. And we'll let Brendan take over for his presentation.